Yes, the Bible says. O Maranatha, hear us, Lord, bring on the day of days. Did send with judgment and reward to shouts of fear and praise. Reveal yourself in flaming fire with angels in their light, that we may see our hearts desire and marvel at the sight. O Maranatha, may it be that soon the saints shall see. O grave, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? The tomb shall tremble at your voice, the sea give up its dead. As one your body shall rejoice, assemble with its dead. O Maranatha, we exclaim, we long to see it now, that every tongue may name your name, and every knee bow. Though earth and all its works shall burn, dissolved with fervent heat, yet haste the day of your return, and make your reign complete. Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you, exalt you in due time. In due time. Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, and cast all your care on Him, for He cares for you. Cares for you. Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you, exalt you in due time.
Glad to see everyone here this morning. I think I'm on now, so the people online can hear me as well. I'm glad to see everybody here this morning. I've got my Bible open to Luke chapter 22. I'll invite you to join me there as we begin our study. I know we're in Luke chapter 23 this morning. We're going to get kind of a running start from some of the things we studied on Wednesday. I want to give a big thank you to Doug for covering for me on Wednesday. As many of you know, we got caught with something fierce on Wednesday. Took my family down. And I'm thankful that Doug was able to cover for me on such short notice. I'm still trying to figure out how to use my words again. I want to acknowledge, he said some really kind things about me on Wednesday, and I just want to caution you, you can't believe everything you hear from the pulpit, okay? Test the spirits to see if they're from God. I appreciated the things that Doug said, not just about me, but about the Scriptures. These are, as he mentioned, these are such pivotal and important sections in the Bible story. In fact, chapter 22 is really, in many ways, a climax. It's bringing us to the culmination of everything. Everything that Jesus has been talking about, everything that Jesus has been working towards, everything that he's been trying to caution his followers about. It's about to come to fruition. And they don't see it. Nobody sees it. But Jesus is calm and cool and completely in control of everything that's about to happen. And as we begin and get into Luke chapter 23, we're going to see really the brutal climax of Jesus' story.
Culmination since the Garden of Eden.
That's exactly right. But before we get into that, I want to make just a real quick plug. So I'm not going to be here next week. Doug is once again going to teach class next Sunday as we wrap up Luke chapter 24. I want to make a quick plug to you for our class that we're going to be studying next quarter. In 2 weeks, we're going to begin a new Bible study called Christ-like Conversations. I've got a syllabus up here at the front if you're interested in grabbing it. It's going to continue our studying and thinking about Jesus. It's going to align with our summer series as we're thinking about unexpected and unforgettable moments with Jesus. But the premise of our class next quarter is to take a little bit different approach as we look at Jesus. We know that he interacted with many people, right? A lot of the gospel stories are about how Jesus engaged people and the things that he said to them and the way that he provoked them. And I want to tap into that next quarter as we think about how Jesus did that. I want to think about how we can apply that to our lives, because we have many people that we engage with, that we interact with, that we have conversations with. And I want us to ask the question, how can we learn from Jesus how to have conversations with one another and conversations with others like Jesus did? So Christ-like conversations, we're going to look at just the different types of people who had questions and a past and problems and doubt, who were going through suffering, who maybe didn't want to listen, and see how Jesus engaged those people. So I want you to be praying and thinking about that. Again, I've got the syllabus up here. Limited quantities for now because the printer was slow this morning, but there is more to come. I'll attach that to the Monday Minute. But I want you to be thinking about and praying about that, beginning in 2 Sundays. All right, let's come back to Luke chapter 22. I want to begin reading, beginning in verse number 47. Speaking about Jesus, while he was still speaking, there came a crowd. And the man called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He drew near to Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus said to him, "Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" And when those who were around him saw what would follow, they said, "Lord, shall we strike with the sword?" And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, "No more of this." And he touched his ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests and officers of the temple and elders who had come out against him, "Have you come out against a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you day after day in the temple, you did not lay hands on me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness." In this hour of darkness, Jesus is going to be betrayed by one of his own, by one of the 12, Luke highlights. In fact, he's going to be abandoned by all of the 12 that he had chosen to follow him. He's going to be denied by one of his closest friends. And ultimately, he's going to be destroyed by these men who hated him. All the while, he knew he could have crushed them with an angelic army. Don't you know I could speak and appeal to my Father and he could send 12 legions of angels? Jesus had this thought in his mind. He could have crushed them. And yet, he continued to move forward with this plan, knowing that it was the will of the Lord to crush him. Isaiah chapter 53 and verse number 10 would tell us. And so Jesus accepted the will of God. He accepted the suffering that he knew what he was going to endure. Why? Why would Jesus allow this if he had the power to stop it? Why did he allow injustice? Why did he allow darkness, as he's just said, to have this moment? I want to ask these questions because these must propel us in our thinking beyond this moment, just as it did Jesus. It not only had to be this way, but it was the only way. You know, the worst of humanity, the worst of the human heart was unleashed against Jesus in these moments that we're going to read about this morning. Against the perfect Son of God, who time and again opened not his mouth, as a lamb before his shears is silent, Isaiah would write. He didn't cry injustice, but what we see from Jesus is he leaned into all of this. He leaned into it. Listen, my friends, we can be certain that Jesus didn't deserve any of this. Multiple times in Luke chapter 22 and Luke chapter 23, random people are going to say, he's not guilty of any of this. We can be certain Jesus didn't deserve any of this, but we can also be certain that Jesus was not a victim. Jesus was not a victim here. This didn't happen by random happenstance. He bore the weight of human sin. Not just in this moment, but for all time, as he became the sacrifice for sins that was killed at the hands of the chief priests. This was their hour. And it all began with an interrogation. You look down in chapter 22, beginning in verse number 66. When the day came, the assembly of the elders of the people gathered together, both chief priests and scribes. Now, I want you to notice in every section, those same people are going to keep showing up because Jesus, back in chapter 9 and verse number 22, said, these are the ones that are going to put me to death. Both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council, and they said, if you are the Christ, tell us. Now, why would they ask him to answer that question? Why are they saying, tell us if you are the Christ? Why is that the question that they're asking Jesus right now?
They think it's blasphemy.
Say that one more time.
He thinks it's blasphemy.
They think it's blasphemy, right? Yeah, they've been listening to the things he's saying, and clearly he's making this claim to be the Christ. So why is this kind of a ridiculous question? Well, Jesus has kind of proven that he is the Christ, hasn't he? It's interesting. It's interesting in this moment where they've come to destroy him. They have nothing else to pin on him except for this claim of blasphemy if he accepts being God. I want you to think about that. Their best effort to condemn Jesus was to accuse him of something that was true. Isn't that crazy? Their best efforts was to accuse him of something that was true, but they weren't willing to accept it. I think we've got to see how blinded they were by their prejudice to Jesus in this moment. I mean, these are religious people who have dedicated their life to knowing the law of God, to knowing his ways, to going through the things. They were expecting this Messiah to come, the Christ, right? They were the ones that were looking for him. And yet, when he did, they wanted nothing to do with him. He didn't align with them. Their convictions, their traditions, they were so caught up in their way of thinking about what God wanted, they assaulted and destroyed the most true thing they had ever been presented with. Can we become so convinced of something that we become blind? I think this shows the reality of the human heart. We can get caught up in our convictions so much that we miss truth. We miss reality. Even if time and again God presents truth to us, we can become so callous, so proud, so just unable to see truth that we set our hearts to destroy it. That's what we see from these religious leaders. And we must be mindful of the desires and these convictions of our heart. And besides that, it's interesting. This is a ridiculous question because it's already been revealed time and again. This is who Jesus was. He's the Christ, right? By angels at his birth, chapter 2 and verse number 11. By Simeon in the temple, chapter 2 and verse 26. By John in chapter 3, time and time and time again. Even the demons said, "You are the Son of God." By Peter, by Jesus, and calling himself the Son of Man, time and time and time again. Hence why Jesus would respond. He would say this at the end of verse 67. "If I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask you, you'll not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God." There was nothing he could do to convince them, right? They clearly understood his claim, but appreciate with me kind of the irony that we see here in verse number 69 when Jesus says, "But from now on, the Son of Man," he's speaking about himself now, "the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God." So he affirms to them that he is the Christ, but he also subtly reveals that they're the path that's going to lead him there. They're the path. He's prophesying about their role in bringing him to glory, which is what he's been saying all along, going back to chapter 9 and verse 22, chapter 17 and verse number 25. They're the ones that are going to lead him to glory. It's really interesting that they wanted to destroy him, but they're actually the ones that are going to seat him in power. Now, Jesus' affirmation here of as being the Christ, it's sufficient enough for them. They look at that and they say, what further testimony do we need? Verse 71, "We have heard it ourselves from his own lips." So they understand what Jesus is saying is, I am the Christ. I am the Son of God. They understand that. And I want you to notice, though, as they are making these accusations, Jesus never explicitly says that. They're the ones that keep saying, he claims to be the Son of God. He claims to be the Christ. They're the ones that keep saying it. And Jesus keeps saying, yeah, what they're saying. What they're saying. Again, they are accusing him of something that is true. And so it moves their plan forward, but they don't have power to put him to death. So what do? Who do they have to go to? Yeah, they got to appeal to a higher authority, right? They got to go to the Romans, the Roman governor. And this is where the story really gets interesting to me. Because we're reintroduced in this section in Luke chapter 23 to two men who are not known for their justice and not known for their mercy. We're reintroduced to Pilate. Do y'all remember what we've learned about Pilate from the Gospel of Luke so far? Do y'all remember anything about Pilate, maybe from chapter 13? Pilate, in chapter 13 and verse number 1, he had some Jews killed, and he mixed their blood with some sacrifices. Pilate was a very harsh leader. He was someone that he had very little patience for Jewish matters. And really, as this story plays out, what we're going to see is he's obviously moved to just maintain his status rather than to stand on justice. This is not somebody who cares about what is right and wrong. And yet, Pilate is going to look at this and say, this isn't right. And then Herod, who Pilate is going to send Jesus over to. Y'all remember who Herod is? Herod was the king of Judea. And he'd already had a run-in with this Messiah movement when John the Baptist called Herod out for his sinful behavior. Y'all remember that from Luke chapter 3? He had John put to death. But he was intrigued about Jesus. He was intrigued about Jesus. But it becomes evident that he's also moved by his own whims. And so needless to say, these two men that Jesus is about to encounter, they should not have been sympathetic to Jesus. And yet we find from both of them that they are underwhelmed by the lack of evidence against Jesus. They both say, what are y'all upset about? And they are overwhelmed by the lack of justice. These men who are not known for either one of those things. And so let's begin looking at chapter 23 and verse number 1, his interaction with Pilate. I want you to notice the question that Pilate asked Jesus. So then the whole company, beginning in verse number 1, the whole company of them arose and brought Jesus before Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, we found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is the Christ. Again, an accusation that is true. But they capture it in a way that is meaningful to the Romans. He's forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar. He's saying that he himself is the Christ. And so what does Pilate ask Jesus? Are you actually a king? Are you the king? So this conversation centers around Jesus' claim And as they stood before Pilate, Pilate asked this question, and he's a bit underwhelmed. He's a bit underwhelmed by all of this. Jesus answered at the end of verse number 3, "You have said so." Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no guilt in this man." So we're not given a whole lot about this interaction, but it's very clear that as Pilate looks at Jesus and he looks at these crowds, he's going, "I don't get it." Like, what are y'all so upset about? He's the king of the Jews. He's yours. Like, what do I have to do with any of this? And so, in essence, Pilate's like, what does this have to do with me? I don't want anything to do with this. So what does Pilate do? He sends Jesus along to somebody else, to Herod, right? The king of Judea. And, perhaps Pilate thought the two of them could duke it out as who wants to be king of the Jews, right? I don't know what he was doing. And how does Herod receive Jesus? Beginning there in verse number 8. Hey, y'all gonna have to wake up this morning. Listen, I don't plan on doing all the talking this morning, John.
It says that he was happy to see him because he'd been hearing about him and was hoping to see a sign performed by him. But something else, it says that he questioned him at some length.
Sure.
And he answered him nothing, but we're not given any details about what that question is all about. When I was reading that, I was kind of curious. I wondered what kind of questions that he was asking.
Yeah. Well, it becomes evident by when Jesus goes back to Pilate. Pilate makes it very clear. Neither I nor Herod found anything that Jesus is guilty of. So whatever questions he asked, he didn't find Jesus guilty. But it is interesting what you're saying, because as Herod toys with Jesus, I don't know what else to say, because obviously he's just trying to get some sort of entertainment value out of Jesus. As he's interacting with Jesus, we're given no questions about his guilt. We're given no questions about, what have you done, Jesus? Why are you so upset? It just is almost as if Herod's just very aloof to this. I don't really care. I want whatever I can get out of this guy. I want to be entertained. In fact, I want to see a sign. Right? It's a very interesting and very unsettling scene, because here are the two men that are supposed to stand for justice and could potentially free Jesus, and yet they're just kind of like, I got my own things I'm worried about. They don't care, and that's kind of how people in the world are. In fact, that's what we're going to see a little bit later from Pilate. He's not really concerned with justice. He's concerned with his status and doing what the people think. It's really sad, but it's a commentary on the world that we live in. These kings, these rulers, they don't truly care about the people. They don't truly care about justice. And yet here is Jesus, who completely cares about the people, completely cares about justice, so much so that he has walked himself into the scene to be justice for the entire world for all time. And people don't care. Human hearts do not care. Selfish human hearts. Listen, my friends, this just highlights why Jesus had to come. He had to come into the world because human hearts are so callous, so blind, so misled that we don't realize how far off and unsaved we are. We are completely lost from God without Jesus. That's why Jesus had to come. And I want to emphasize that, because so often I think we think about Jesus just in such limited terms. He came to redirect our thinking, or he came to fulfill. And I think that some of those, that word fulfillment is true, but at the same time, he came to completely and radically change our paradigm and to expose just how wicked and how foolish we are. We weren't just doing fine. If we were, Jesus wouldn't have had to come. He wouldn't have had to give his life. He wouldn't have had to go through all this stupid injustice. This makes me angry, watching what Jesus had to go through and asking the question, why? And yet he opened not his mouth. My friends, there's something very profound that ought to shake us to our core as we think about, why did Jesus have to go through this? Why was he so convinced that he must do these things? It's to expose the wickedness and the foolishness of the human heart, but it's also to provide the sacrifice for those things. He confronts wickedness in our hearts, but he also saves us from those things. It must be this way. So here he stands before Herod, and Herod doesn't get what he wants from him. He questioned him, verse number 9. He questioned him at some length, but Jesus makes no answer. All the while, you've got the chief priests and the scribes. What are they doing in verse number 10? They're accusing him. They're just constantly in his ear. You know, it's interesting, the language that's used there. That's the language that's used of Satan. He used to stand before God and accuse. That's the language used in Revelation. Accuse those who are trying to be believers in Jesus Christ. They are doing the very things that Satan does. Accusing the Son of God. And Herod, he just kind of does his own thing with Jesus. Verse number 11, he arrays him in splendid clothing. He mocks him. They treat him with contempt. He sends him back to Pilate. And so Pilate, once again, has a mess on his hands. Here's a ruler of the Romans. And, you know, in some way, he's trying to figure out, okay, what's going on here. But he's also got this big looming thing in his mind of, I don't want this to cause a scene, right? Because if the Jews had an uprising and he doesn't put it down, it was his responsibility. The Romans didn't put up with this kind of mess. In his mind, he's thinking, how do I deal with this in a way that's going to keep me out of trouble? And it becomes very obvious when they come back to him that he's wrestling with these two thoughts. How do I navigate this without causing too much of a scene? But also, how do I deal with the reality of this injustice? Because it's very clear when he comes back to Jesus, or when Jesus comes back to Pilate. Look at what he says beginning in verse number 14. Verse 13. He called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, and he said to them, "You brought me this man as one who is misleading the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. A man not known for any sort of justice." Says, I can see this clear as day. He was the perfect Son of God. And even these secular leaders could see his innocence. And so what does Pilate resolve to do there in verse number 16? Yeah, that's right. I'll punish him and I'll release him. In fact, twice he's going to say, this is what I'm going to do, guys. Just go away. I'm going to punish him. I'm going to release him. He's going to say that again in verse number, what verse is it? Verse number 22. He's going to say the same thing. I have found in him no guilt deserving of death. I will therefore punish and release him. And they're not having anything to do with it. Now, I want you to notice, it's really interesting how Pilate kind of morphs in this situation, because he's the one that's trying to reason with them. It should have been the other way around, right? Where you've got these chief priests, these rulers, these religious rulers of the people who should be trying to reason for mercy and grace. But it's the secular leader who is trying to be reasonable here. Beginning in verse number 13, he tells them, I don't find this man guilty, neither did Herod. Again, in verse number 20, once more desiring to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, crucify him. And he said to them, why, what evil has he done? I found in him no guilt deserving of death. You know, I want to just kind of step to the side real quick and just make a comment about Pilate. And I mean, his conscience is clearly pricked in all of this. It's disturbed. Because he could have very easily just been like, just go, just do what you want to do. I don't care. But he's sitting here and he's going, this is not right. It's so much so that his conscience says, I've got to stop this. He desired to have Jesus released. There's something to be said for letting our conscience shape our thinking in these sort of moments. That's why God gave us a conscience. Even people of a secular mentality who don't have a spiritual bone in their body can be impacted by their conscience in these moments of stress. If this man with a weak moral compass can gain clarity in this intense moment, we can too. We can too, if we listen to our conscience. Now here, Luke only records Pilate's efforts to change the minds of the people. 3 times he pleads with them to see the injustice, but they just keep shouting. They just keep shouting. Verse number 21. Crucify him. I want you to notice, like, up to this point, there hasn't really been any mention of how to kill Jesus. The reality is there were lots of ways that they could have killed Jesus. Right? They could have hanged him. They could have cut off his head. They could have done many other. But they wanted to crucify him. Because crucifixion was not just a means of killing someone, it was a means of degrading someone. It was a way of saying, you are shameful to us. The Romans only crucified the worst of people. And you guys know the process of crucifixion, where they would hang out in the sun for everyone to see. They put them in very public places. They made a spectacle that people could observe. Why would they want that to be the way that Jesus died? Again, I think it reveals the human heart. They don't just want him dead. They want him shamefully and brutally taken out of their lives. They want it to be made known. We want nothing to do with this. My friends, this is the human heart towards God. This is our human selfishness at its very worst. Maybe we don't relate to them exactly, but this is the reason Jesus had died, because within each one of our hearts is this desire for what we want. And it's an aversion even to God. And Jesus came to confront that and to show us who we really are, but also to change us. And you can see when Jesus is rejected, it goes to the very worst of circumstances. They keep shouting, crucify him, with urgency. Urgency. Until their voices prevail. Verse number 23, they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified. And Pilate, after 3 times pleading with them, verse 24, decided that their demand should be granted. Now, within all of this, there's this really interesting side story of this man named Barabbas. Who was Barabbas? What do we know about this man? He was rebellious and he was a murderer. Okay? So he had stirred up this insurrection. He had killed some people. I don't know why we're still on that slide. I don't like that. And so this was a bad dude. And you think about from Pilate's perspective, Barabbas is not the kind of person you want walking the streets, right? And yet, this is the man that the crowd say, we want him instead of Jesus. Think about how much they hated Jesus. They hated Jesus so much they would rather have someone who was rebellious and a murderer walking among them rather than having Jesus. And I want you to think about the irony in all of this and the depth of what Jesus was about to do. He takes the place of a man who was a murderer. That man is allowed to walk free, to go back into his life, while Jesus takes his place as the one who is crucified. And Jesus is delivered over to their will. I can't even begin to capture how terrible and wrong all of this is. And we know it. But Jesus said, I must do this. I must do this. And so Pilate delivers Jesus over to be crucified. Verse 26. And as they led him away, they seized one Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, and laid on him the cross to carry it behind Jesus. And there followed him a great multitude of people and of women who were mourning and lamenting for him. But Jesus, turning to them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bore and the breasts that never nursed. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry? I want you to notice something really interesting that Luke does. Jesus has been delivered over to their will. He's going to be crucified, right? And the drama of the crucifixion cannot be understated. But what is interesting is I read through the Gospel of Luke, and really as you read through any of the Gospel accounts, is that the crucifixion is really very understated in how it happened. I know that there have been books that have been written and commentaries about what crucifixion involved and the brutal nature of it. The Gospels don't give us a lot of that, presumably because most people knew what crucifixion was. We learn from other Gospels about the preliminary beating that Jesus endured, where he was beaten beyond human semblance, as Isaiah 52 would prophesy. Beaten to the place where you can't even recognize him as a human being. He's just this pulp of flesh. And he hadn't even hung on the cross yet. It was so devastating that Jesus didn't even have the strength to carry his own cross. And during this process, we're told from the other Gospels that they took this crown of thorns and they shoved it into his head. And they stripped the clothes from him, stripped his dignity, mocked him, laughed at him, spit in his face. Put yourself in the shoes of Jesus. This process was brutal and excruciating. And they finally get to the place where they're going to kill him. And they laid him on the cross and they drove those nails into his hands and into his feet. And they hung him up where he would hang for hours, several hours, at least until noon, until he died. It's interesting to me, of all the Gospels, Luke records the least amount of details about the crucifixion. Here's Luke who's a doctor. You think he'd be fascinated with that, right? Luke's not interested in focusing on the logistics of the crucifixion. It's there. The drama, the horror of crucifixion is evident from what's going on. But instead, Luke turns our attention, rather, to these random people that saw the crucifixion, that engaged Jesus in this moment. These verses that we just read, verses 26 through 31, what's Jesus doing as he's going to the cross? He's speaking to people. He's still seeing people. These people who are mourning and lamenting for him. What does he do? He mourns and laments for them. He warns them, there are things coming. There's a reason I must do this. He still cares about the people. He still sees the people. These are the things that are driving Jesus. Yes, he is in immense pain and he is suffering terribly, but Jesus is still engaged with the people and doing this for the people. And Luke wants to show us these random folks that interact and encounter Jesus. This man, Simon of Cyrene, we don't know much about this man. He comes in from the country, and all of a sudden there's this processional to murder a man. They're like, you come here. His life is impacted by Jesus and his death, almost against his will. And then he talks to us about these two criminals, these two others, who were sentenced to death alongside Jesus. You've got one who despised Jesus, and you've got the other one who accepts his innocence. Beginning in verse 39, one of the criminals who were hanged railed at Jesus, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us." Here's a man with nothing to lose. He's heard the things about Jesus, obviously. Aren't you the Christ? But in great disdain, he aligns with the human heart of the religious leaders. But the other, verse 40, rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." Here are two men in their final moments who see Jesus and are exposed to who Jesus is, the Christ. They're exposed to the reality of his innocence, and they're impacted in two very different ways. One of them says, whatever. The other one says, well, he's the only hope that I have. Again, this shows the reality of our choices when we are exposed to Jesus. We see the guards. These people who were professional executioners, if you will. They come to this place and they're casting lots to divide his garments. The people are standing by, verse number 35, watching. But the rulers scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is the Christ of God, his chosen one." You notice they keep using that title. They keep saying, "If you are the Christ," those words keep coming out of their mouth. Who Jesus truly is, and yet they will not accept it. Jesus could have come off that cross right then and showed them who he was. But he must do this. You know, it's interesting. They don't realize how profound their challenges to Jesus are. The soldiers mocked him, verse 36, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." You see how that keeps coming up time and time again. Jesus knew this is why he is here. He's the king. He's come to initiate a kingdom. But this is how it must be. And then finally there was the centurion. The centurion who observed all of this. Beginning in verse 44, it was now about the 6th hour. And there was darkness over the whole land until about the 9th hour. So the 6th hour is noon. So the 9th hour would be around 3. While the sun's light faded, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, calling out with a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And having said this, he breathed his last. Now when the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God, saying, "Certainly this man was innocent." It's interesting how that's phrased there. He praised God. He understood the innocence of Jesus, but surely he understood there was something more. I was wondering, as I read through this, how many times that centurion had stood at the foot of the cross and seen others and saw the way that they died and known the stories. You know, people in those kind of situations all claim to be innocent. Here was Jesus who truly was. And this centurion was impacted by Jesus. All of these random people, because Jesus chose to walk this path to the cross, they interact with Jesus in these final moments, and it changes them. It exposes the worst of their heart, but it also exposes the realities of their life. Makes them think about themselves, makes them really question the existential things of this life. And it's the same way today. Jesus is the Savior for everyone. He shows no partiality. He reserves no special grudges, even against the worst. You know, we've talked time and again about how these people, these religious leaders who wanted to kill Jesus so bad, he continued to be merciful and patient and tried to expose them. Jesus held no special grudges. He just said, "Woe to you," as he tried to help them. And Jesus committed himself to the will of God for you and for me. You know, when witnessed clearly, Jesus' death should impact all of us with extreme emotion. This was not a neutral event. Everyone who came to the cross that day felt something. Everyone who walked away, verse 48, all the crowds that had assembled for this spectacle, when they saw what had taken place, returned home beating their breasts. This was the greatest injustice and the most profound blessing to ever be witnessed. This was not a neutral event that you just walk away from unchanged. And it shouldn't be for us today. As we hear the story of Jesus, it must move us and challenge us. Why? I'm curious, as you read the story of the crucifixion and think about all these things, what's your reaction to all of these things? How does this story strike you? Was there anything that stands out to you here? Dennis?
You know, this is part of the Bible probably the most uncomfortable reading that we do. A lot of times we try to avoid it, I think, because it is uncomfortable.
Sure.
But I think you've said everything that really can be said. There's enough. We don't have all the details like what the historians wrote on, but there's enough there that causes discomfort.
That's right.
There's enough written there to know the injustice. There's enough there written to know the brutality. But I've always been amazed with the thief of the cross. I've always been amazed with that. Because you go to the other accounts, you don't have this account, other than at one point he was blaspheming.
That's right.
But at some point, something changed.
Yeah.
And you just see the reaction of the people and their understanding of what took place.
That's right.
Through all this cruelty, through all this injustice, the realization that just hit that you were just so amply just told us, it just hit their hearts. And that's what every time we do the Lord's Supper, it ought to wrench our heart.
That's right.
And it ought to wrench our heart to the point we understand what you went through for us. And I think that's the most important thing. He tells us to remember. This is what we're to remember. Yes, he suffered, but look at how people recognized him. How important he was and the glory that was given to God.
Great thought. Andrew?
What struck me was how persistent the chief priests and the crowds were to do this evil. Never once, from the time they bribed somebody to betray him, to an evil man like Herod trying to discourage them from doing this evil thing, and then they found themselves defending a murderer. Never once did one of them stop and ask themselves, hey, maybe this isn't the right thing. But they had ample opportunity.
That's right.
The back and forth between Pilate and Herod. Just amazing.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The scene ends as Jesus is taken down from the cross and he is buried. And I want to draw our attention as we end to verse number 56. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointment, and on the Sabbath day they rested, according to the commandment. Many commandments have been broken on this day. Andrew just mentioned, Matthew goes into more detail about how explicitly the scribes and the religious leaders broke the law regarding justice. Many laws and commandments had been broken, but the Sabbath day would be observed. How ironic that Jesus, the Lord of the Sabbath, would be buried on this day. But something much more profound occurred in this moment. The Sabbath was a day of remembrance. To the Jews, they remembered the covenant he made with his people and for him to be their God. But going all the way back to creation, the Sabbath was a memorial of God at rest. On the seventh day, God rested because things were as they should be after 6 days of creation. And as the Sabbath day evolved, some had made it into this day filled with rules and regulations to keep people from working too much. But the Sabbath was not a practice intended to keep people simply from overworking. It was a day for people to be at peace with God, trusting in his power and his providence. It was a day that commemorated that God was enough and that he would always provide what is necessary. How profound then, that for the first time since the fall of man, there was an opportunity for people to truly be at peace with God. To see that God was enough because Jesus was. He had perfectly provided for them this rest, this peace with God through his sacrifice. And so these followers of Jesus, they rested. Not just from their work, but they had a moment and an opportunity for the first time to truly be at peace with God because of the sacrifice and the blood of Jesus Christ. Thank God for that. We'll end right there this morning. We'll pick up in chapter 24 next Sunday. Thank you guys for your thoughts and your comments this morning.